Hello! Today I'm going to be showing you how to get perfect battle-ready Pokemon in Gen 3, specifically in Emerald. Why in Emerald? Because it's so much easier because of a bug in the game's RNG system, but also because Emerald is simply the best game, especially out of all the Gen 3 games. So I've gone ahead and picked out a Pokemon that I would like to obtain in Emerald, which is this Blissey. And there's a lot of numbers on the screen, and if you haven't seen this before, it's probably pretty foreign. So we're going to go ahead and break down what all these numbers mean before we get into how you're going to actually obtain this Pokemon. For starters, most people will probably be familiar with the fact that each Pokemon, you have 6 stats. Let's get my pen going here. Right here. These 6 stats, represented by HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. And these ending stats that we have over on the right are accumulation of a couple things. First of all, the Pokemon's base stats, which are right here. So this depends on the Pokemon species. So all Blissey will have a base of 255 HP, 10 attack, 10 defense, 75 special attack, 135 special defense, and 55 speed. So depending on the Pokemon species, these will always be consistent, and it's not very often that 2 Pokemon have the same distribution of base stats, although it can happen. You don't have to do anything for this part. Any Blissey that you obtain will have these stats, so we don't really have to worry about that. But it does impact your decision for maybe thinking about what Pokemon you would want to add to a team. So from there, we have effort values. And if you haven't heard of these before, they are secret values that you can get in the game whenever this Pokemon contributes to a battle that it gets experience in. And it will get an EV based on what the opposing Pokemon's best stats are. So for example, if I defeat a Poochyena, his best stat is attack, and so it will give an attack EV. So the exact EVs that each Pokemon will give vary, and you can look them up. There's a list of how they distribute. I don't know if it's always the best stat, but very often that's the case. In some rare cases, the EVs will be spread among more than one stat, so maybe it'll give 1 point in attack and 1 point in defense. And Pokemon can give up to 3 EVs in a specific stat. So why do EVs matter? Every 4 EVs that you have will give you +1 in that stat. So if I have 4 attack EVs, it will give me 1 more in my final output of what my attack stat is. And like I said, we get EVs by having a Pokemon participate in a battle where the other Pokemon is defeated. We will get EVs based on what species that is. But it can also be affected by 2 other things. One of them is pokerus, which I'm going to make pink. P-K-R-S. So pokerus is a virus that Pokemon can contract. It's extremely rare. It doesn't harm them in any way, but it will double all of their EV gains. So to get pokerus, there's ways to abuse RNG for it, but for the most part, you will just have to encounter a ton of wild Pokemon, and very, very rarely ones that you catch or defeat in battle will give you pokerus to Pokemon that participated in the battle, or if you caught it, that Pokemon will have pokerus. The virus spreads through all of the Pokemon in your party when any of them battles. So if I have my Rayquaza send out and I battle, if any of the Pokemon in my party have pokerus, it will spread among them. And after a certain amount of time, it will be healed, and then the Pokemon will have a little dot next to its name. If your save battery is dead, which it probably will be because it's now been 20 years since Emerald's release, that's a long time. So if the battery's dead, the time function isn't working, which means pokerus will never heal. So you never have to worry about this other part, but if pokerus heals, you'll just get the dot. You'll keep the EV effect, so that Pokemon all good, but you won't be able to spread it to new Pokemon, which is kind of a bummer because pokerus, frankly, is a pretty cool thing. So if you have pokerus and your battery has been replaced or for some reason still works after 20 years, you can throw a Pokemon that has pokerus in the PC. It will not get better while it's in the PC, and you can periodically take it out, go battle with it with other Pokemon in your party, and the virus will kind of keep spreading, so you can keep reinfecting new Pokemon with it. The other one is the Macho Brace, which is an item that was created in Gen 3. It exists in other generations, but it halves the Pokemon's speed in battle, but they also will gain EVs twice as fast. So with Pokerus and the Macho Brace, you get a 2 times 2 multiplier, a 4 times multiplier. So every single time that you gain EVs, you will gain 4 times the normal value. So back to our Poochyena example. We knock out the Poochyena, we get 1 EV, it's multiplied by 4. We will get 4 EVs in attack because that's what Poochyena gives, and thus we get +1 to our attack stat. You can also use something like a Torkoal. Torkoal will give 2 EVs in defense. If I have the Macho Brace and Pokerus, that is going to give us 8 EVs total for +2 in our defense stat. EVs can be removed from Pokemon with certain berries, but it's better to just kind of get it right off the bat. Also, up to your first 100 total EVs, you can use the vitamin items, which will just give +10 in a specific stat. So if I have a Pokemon with no EVs, meaning I just obtained it, I can give it 10 of these different vitamins, and then 10 times 10 is 100, but once it hits 100, it can't take any more vitamins. If I also go out and I catch it and I give it 100 EVs from battling, I can no longer give it any of the vitamins. And the vitamins are great because they just save a ton of time rather than going out and having to battle a whole lot. So you'll notice that there seems to be a limit on these EVs. Let me look back with my red. So you'll notice that there's a limit with EVs. A Pokemon can only have 510. Whoa, what happened there? 510 total. So you can see where I have this 0. It's because these numbers, 252, 252, and 4, will add up to 510. So the most that you can have in a single stat is actually 254. Bit of a curveball there, but you weren't expecting that. So why do I not have 254 EVs in my HP, you may be asking? Well, it's because if you think about it, 254 is not evenly divisible by 4. So putting extra EVs in, unless it's a multiple of 4, doesn't do anything. For example, if I have 6 EVs, that only means I'm only getting +1 to the stat, because the biggest multiple of 4 that goes into 6 is 1. Right? It's only for every 4. I have 2 EVs left over that aren't even doing anything. Wasteful. That's why we're given 252 and 252, because we can save 2 extra EVs from one stat and 2 extra EVs from another to just put 4 somewhere else, and then we get +1 in that stat. Now, knowing how to EV your Pokemon, meaning how to distribute those points, thinking about what number do I want for each of these final stats, can be quite difficult to do accurately if you're not quite familiar with Pokemon. So I would say for the most part, the best thing to do is copy what other people did, but try to understand their logic for why they did it. For example, this Blissey has no real attacking moves, so there's no reason for me to invest at all in attack. So if I go online and I see a Blissey spread that invests in attack, it's probably doing that for some other reason. Of course, for Blissey, I don't think you'd ever invest in attack because 10 is an extremely pitiful number, and there's no reason to really take advantage of that. So I would say for the most part, my basic 101 to EVing is just look at the 2 biggest stats a Pokemon has and max those out with 252, 252, make them huge. The issue with this particular example is that if you look at this HP, it is so big, it is kind of overflowing and even kind of goes behind this box over here where it says the EVs, and the special defense is also quite titanic. So when a Blissey gets hit by a special attack, it has a huge special defense and a huge HP attack. It takes so little damage that we actually don't really need to invest very much in special defense, if at all. And the defense stat is really important because that can be Blissey's big weakness. So we will not be going with the 2 biggest stats. For most other Pokemon, if you don't know what you're doing, I would just recommend doing that. But for Blissey, we're just going to dump it into these 2 stats. Also, unless you have a really good reason for it, which if you're watching this video, you probably know how this all works already, so you don't need me to explain it, but it's usually not best to dump into both attacking stats. Usually, you kind of want to just use one or the other, or think about how much do I need exactly in each stat, and, maybe I put, maybe 150 in this one, and then maybe, 100 in this one, and maybe some distribution of it elsewhere. But again, if you know how to do all that, you don't need to watch this video. So for most other Pokemon, again, 252, 252, and then we have this plus and minus. And this comes from the nature, which is down here. And you can see for this nature, we have plus defense, which makes sense. We have plus on defense, and minus attack, which is here. Which, again, what we want to do is just use our nature to make our most important, biggest stat. In this case, defense is more important. But for other Pokemon, just go with whatever the biggest one is. Increase that and decrease whichever one of its attacking stats it's not using. So if the Pokemon has no special attack, there's no reason to invest in it. We can put the minus here. But Blissey is not really using any physical attacks that use its attack stat. So we're going to go ahead and just put our minus here as a protractor. So there are 25 different natures, and each one gives a bonus to one stat and a minus to another stat. Because HP is not affected by nature. So I wish there was a nature that could increase Blissey's HP, but alas, such a nature does not yet exist. It can never affect HP. So instead, we invested all of this in defense. Let's use our 10% multiplier that we get from our nature in here. So we get plus 10% wherever the plus is, and minus 10% wherever the attack is. So when you think about it, if we already invest a bunch into attack, we get a nice bonus. And if our attack stat is already terrible, taking away 10% of it really does not decrease Blissey's total stats by very much. Also, you'll notice that I said 25, and there's 6 stats, but HP isn't counted, so that's 5, which means there are natures that will both increase and decrease the same stat, which ends up not having an effect on the Pokemon stats. Generally, we don't want to do this because we want to take advantage of the nature bonus, but just know that there are, for some reason, 5 different natures that have no actual effect on the Pokemon stats. And of course, when you go catch an important Pokemon, it seems that they always happen to have one of these 5 natures, and you just got to go rats. Next up, the IVs. These are the individual values. They're kind of like genetics, because they can also be passed through breeding. So when a Pokemon is normally generated, you go out in the wild, you run into something. These IVs are all generated from 0 to 31, one random value, and a new one is selected for each stat. So we might get 6, and then 20, and then 2, and then 31, and then 15, and then 5, right? Maybe that's what our IVs would look like when we go encounter something in the wild. And each of these points that you have in IVs correlates directly with a +1 in the stat. So we pretty much want to just max these out across the board, because it's almost always better to have more of a stat. Now, there is one exception. You'll notice I have this 0 here. And this is because we are not actually using our attack stat. So it doesn't really matter what this number is, with the exception of a few mechanics. And one of them is confusion. When you hit yourself in confusion, you will do damage to yourself based on your own attack stat. So we're going to set this to 0 to minimize our attack. And this is actually where the kind of drawback of the nature is actually used to our advantage. We want this attack stat to be as small as possible, so that if we hit ourselves in confusion, we are doing as little damage as we possibly can be doing. If you have a Pokemon that's not going to use its special attack stat, this IV probably will not matter. I was thinking maybe if I want to change this Blissey and give it Ice Beam or some other sort of special attack, it's just handy to have this already be 31, really, because why not? There's no real drawback to it other than it takes more time. But if you are dead certain that your Pokemon is never going to use its special attack stat in any capacity, you don't have to care about this value at all. That being said, all of the other IVs will always be used, right? Pokemon is always going to have HP. You want to have HP. That's how you keep your Pokemon alive. There's pretty much, you always want to have a 31 in defense and a 31 in special defense so that the damage you take is reduced by as much as possible. And same thing for speed. Going first is a huge advantage. So even for slower Pokemon, you may as well have 31 speed, because that way if I come up against another Blissey or another Pokemon with base 55 speed, or perhaps a Pokemon with 60 speed that doesn't have a perfect IV, we can be faster than it, which is normally a huge advantage. When we get our Blissey, we first need to have either a Blissey or a Chansey that we can breed, because that is how we are going to take advantage of Emerald's broken RNG. So if you look at this spread and you think about what are the odds of encountering a Blissey like this in the wild, it's terrible, because a number between 0 and 31 means there can be 32 distinct values, and that is across 6 different stats. So it is a 1 in 32 chance to get the specific IV you want, and we have to do that 6 times, once for each stat. The probability of this happening is pretty much impossibly low, and there's no direct way to really take advantage of this unless you are willing to wait for days, if not weeks, with your game running and tracking how much time has passed extremely meticulously, and perhaps repeating that process 20 or so times. I'm not doing that. If you would like to, you are welcome to, but there are much easier ways, because as I mentioned earlier, IVs are like genetics in that they are hereditary. So if I have a parent, and we're going to make up some parents here. We're going to have parent A and parent B. We have, again, 6 IVs for each Pokemon. Okay, so here we have our example of parent A, parent B, and parent A. We have an HP IV of 2, 21 attack, 17 defense, 16 special attack, 0 special defense, and 31 speed. When you see Pokemon stats, they're pretty much always going to be in this order. It's just kind of what's common. It's what's displayed in the Pokemon games. It's, I think, in my head, personally, what I consider to make the most sense. And I think that's pretty true of most people. So, when you breed 2 Pokemon, you will always have a parent A and a parent B, and that is determined by what order you put them into the nursery. So whatever Pokemon goes in first is A, and whatever one was put in most recently is parent B. And a new child is going to be generated with IVs. So what we are going to do is actually take some IVs from the parents and replace the ones that already exist. So it's going to go ahead and generate some IVs for, we'll change this, for your Pokemon, and then some of those are going to be replaced. So then what the game is going to do is it's going to randomly choose one of the IVs from the parents, perhaps this one from A, and then it's going to get one from the other parent. We're going to say maybe this one, and then it's going to choose one more time, and this one can come from either parent. We'll make this one purple, and maybe it's going to take the speed of this Blissey. Could have also been some other stat of parent B, but now there are 3 total IVs that are being passed down from the parents. And then we're going to replace what would have been generated with what's coming from the parents. So this speed becomes 31. The attack instead becomes 6. And this is special attack instead becomes 16. Right on. So if you notice, if we have parents with stronger IVs, we can leverage that to combine that with good RNG and the other stats to get a Pokemon that has that 31, 31, 31, so on spread that we're trying to get. Now, when you're breeding and you are not getting the results you want, it's kind of important to note the parent IVs, or at least it can be very helpful, because then you can know, okay, which IVs have been passed and it can help tell you which frame you hit when you're trying to abuse the RNG, which I will explain later. But just know it is kind of helpful to know these IVs, and if you want to figure them out, you can use an online tool and type in the stats of the Pokemon and a little bit of information about it. And as you level it up, which you can just save, level it up with rare candies, put all the information in, and then turn the game off so you don't waste the rare candies, but use all the information, it will give you the IVs. Just be careful that it doesn't have any EVs, or if you do know the EVs, make sure you know what they are, because otherwise it will make calculating the IVs much more difficult. The other important thing to note is that this example worked out kind of nicely, where we have these 3 distributed stats, but we can have some bad luck, where if all of the stats that are chosen to be replaced are the same one, we don't have as much change in our child. So for example, here we got the speed stat from A, the speed stat from B, and then that third one, which can come from either parents, comes from A and is the speed stat again. So in this unlucky case, we're only going to be passing on one single IV to the child. That's another thing to keep in mind, is that it's not always guaranteed to be distributed evenly for the IVs. Our mission here is to find a spread that will have 3 out of the 6 IVs that we want. So for example, I just happen to know, because I did this recently, I found one that was 31, 4, 31, and this came from B, and this came from B, and this came from A. So this is what I ended up getting. 4 was close enough to 0 that I was like, you know what, that's fine. The really important stats in this case are definitely the HP and defense, and those were both perfect, and everything else was perfect. So I didn't mind having a little bit more attack, because again, the only situation that's going to come in handy in is if our Blissey is confused. And as you can see, this 31 will come from parent A, and this will become 31. And then B, we will get 31 special attack and 31 special defense, and that is the Blissey that we are going for. So we're going to go ahead and try to see how we'd actually do this with this tool, RNG Reporter, which you can use other ones. I know Pokefinder is another one. I use this just because I'm an old school VLONE thug, and this is what I learned it with, and it works fine for me. So for here, we've got different methods. This is for all the different games. We're going to go ahead and do Emerald. You can see there's splits, no splits, and alternate. I would do no splits. Splits are ways that the RNG is accidentally called mid-frame. It's extremely inconsistent, but sometimes you can get those alternate or split spreads when you don't mean to, and aiming for them can be a real pain in the butt because they're not fully understood. So we're going to stay away from that for now. Breeding, emerald splits, and you can just see if I generate. This is every single frame since the game starts running that will be generated. So actually all of these are unobtainable because it takes a certain amount of frames to get through all the menus, right? When you start the game up, you're not instantly there in the game. You need to wait a certain amount of time before you can even encounter a Pokemon. You need to, click A through all the menus and everything. So as soon as you turn the device on, or the, second you soft reset it, that's when it starts counting these frames. So if I want a Blissey that has, this is equal to 0. Go ahead and punch this all in. 31, 31, 31, 31. Let's see. Okay, so I would have to wait 20 minutes and 29 seconds to get one that is perfect if I was breeding. And I would need to have a parent that has a perfect attack stat, a parent with a perfect defense stat. That's the same one parent. So I need to get a Pokemon that has both of these perfect. And then I need a different one with a perfect special defense. 20 minutes is a very long time to wait. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this parameter, and let's go ahead and see. And this is the spread that I actually end up hitting. You'll see it's 40 seconds. That's really not bad. I would say anything within 2 minutes is doable. And 4, frankly, is pretty low. I was pretty happy with this. So this, again, you can see from the example, I need a parent with perfect special attack, perfect special defense, and another one with perfect speed. This really is not that hard. So what I'd start by doing, go out. Oh, I can't draw. Go out and get a ditto. And in fact, get a bunch of dittos. You can use repeat balls. They're in this one cave in Emerald. And just catch a bunch of them. And then you can go to this man who will tell you how good the IVs are. And each time, if an IV is perfect, he will only tell you one at a time, which is really annoying. So if I had a Pokemon that had both a perfect special attack and a perfect special defense stat, every time I ask him how good are this Pokemon's IVs, it'll say, oh, excellent. It has a perfect special attack. And the next time I ask him, it just keeps randomly picking between those two. So it might say special attack, it might say special defense. So to actually find out what a Pokemon has, you usually have to ask him 2 or 3 times, or sometimes, depending on how sure you want to be, I would actually ask maybe more like 6 or 8 times, just to make sure that you know all of the IVs that are perfect, because he will only tell you one at a time. So you go out, you catch a bunch of Dittos. Now you'll at least have some with perfect IVs. That's great. Now take whatever Pokemon you want to breed it with, which in this case would be Chansey, and you breed it with the Chansey to get a parent that fits this criteria. So let's say I go out and I get a Ditto with a perfect special attack stat. That's nice. Now I know that a certain number of the eggs that this Ditto will produce will have a perfect special attack stat. I can breed that with a Chansey until I get one with a perfect special attack stat, and then maybe switch it out with a Ditto that has perfect special defense, blah, yada, yada, yada. This you can all kind of do manually, right? You understand that this gets passed down. You can go talk to the guy and check it. You can get a Pokemon with 2 perfect IVs somewhat easily without having to abuse any RNG. So we're going to keep doing this until we get a Chansey that fits this criteria. And then you have the other parent. Again, no particular order, but just make sure that if I bred something to have this special attack, special defense, I need to put it in the first slot. Otherwise, it will instead be passing on its speed. We don't want that. We want these 2 stats. So in our other slot, we're not going to have a Chansey because Chanseys are always female and therefore cannot breed because you need a female and a male, with the exception of Ditto. So you can do it with Ditto, but what we're actually going to do is get a Roselia, because if you look at our Blissey's spread, we want aromatherapy, and the only way to get aromatherapy is to get a Roselia leveled up to 59 so that it can learn that attack, and then we'll breed it with a Chansey to get a Chansey that knows aromatherapy. So we're going to keep breeding Roselia until we get one with a perfect speed IV. It needs to also be male. And then we're going to train it up until it learns aromatherapy. We're going to delete all of its other moves so it doesn't accidentally forget aromatherapy from something else that it picks up in the daycare from leveling up. Now we have that second Roselia with the perfect speed and this Chansey. We're going to go ahead and throw them in the daycare. Once they are in the daycare, we are going to start breeding eggs. Now, you just kind of run around, and then eventually you can see this guy will walk out, which means an egg is ready. We're going to go over to him, and before we talk to him, we are going to save the game. Because at this point, the PID, the Pokemon ID of our Chansey, has already been determined. And the PID is a number that controls several things. So it will control the gender, whether the Pokemon is shiny, the Pokemon's nature, and for certain Pokemon, it will control their forms. So for the unknown, it will be a different letter depending on the PID, and Wurmple will evolve into either Silcoon or Cascoon depending on the PID value. Part of the PID will be used as a random number to determine whether it's female or male. Pokemon can have 50-50 ratios or maybe 3/4 ratios, or there are some other ones. But our Blissey is always going to be female. We don't really have to worry about it. And also, gender is very, very, very infrequently relevant in competitive battling. Very few situations that's even going to come into play. If you really want a specific gender, you can reset for it, but it's not very important. Shininess is very rare. You need your trainer ID, which can be found on your trainer card, and a secret ID, which has to be calculated elsewhere to coincide perfectly with the Pokemon's PID in such a way that only happens 1 out of every 8,192 times. Now, there are ways to abuse this. I'm not going to go into this today because it doesn't matter whether a Pokemon is shiny or not for its competitive use. Again, there are some niche cases where it can make a difference, but these are so few and far between and not relevant that we're going to go ahead and skip those. That being said, at this point, because we have saved before picking up the egg, the PID of the egg has been generated and the IVs are not. So if I have a Pokemon that comes out and it is male and shiny, and I turn my gain off, turn it back on, pick up the egg again, hatch the egg again, it is also going to be male and shiny. And it will also have the same nature. And we can do that as many times as we want because at that point we already have some piece of the puzzle. So I'm going to go ahead and save, pick up the egg, run around until the egg hatches, until a Blissey pops out that has a bold nature. Now I forgot to mention there's one more thing that the PID affects, and that is its ability. So each Pokemon, until the later generations, like 5, will have one of 2 ability slots. And for some Pokemon, the same ability is in both slots. Like Flygon, both of its ability slots are Levitate. So every single Flygon you encounter will have Levitate. But Blissey has 2. It has Natural Cure, and it also has Serene Grace. So the PID will also determine randomly which of these 2 abilities Blissey will get. So I'm going to keep going through this process of saving before I get the egg, take the egg out, hatch the egg, which you can also, if you have a Pokemon that has Magma Armor or Flame Body in your party, it makes the egg hatch faster. You can't stack it, so just get like 1 Slugma, because they'll always have one of those 2 abilities. Throw it in your party, run a Bound Bunch. It will cut the time it takes to hatch eggs in half, which is lovely. When the egg is hatched, check. Is it the ability I want, and is it the nature I want? And there are ways to RNG abuse this, but frankly, this part I believe is faster to just do manually. So you go through, you keep hatching eggs until you have one come out like this. Great. At this point, its IVs are probably not the ones you want, so we're going to go ahead and turn our game off so that we know that this egg is kind of primed for us to look for our proper IVs. So we have the 2 Pokemon that we want in the daycare already for them to pass on their IVs. All of these other things are checked off for the Pokemon. We know that it's going to have our egg move Aromatherapy, which we want it to have. Seismic Toss, we can teach it from the Move Tutor. Soft Boiled, it learns naturally on Level Up. Toxic, it gets from a TM. So we don't have to worry about any of these moves. All the moves are taken care of. Item we don't have to worry about because you can just give and take items from Pokemon at any time. Super easy to change. And we have the nature and we have the ability. So the only thing left that we need to do for this Pokemon for now is the IVs. So we are going to get a tool like Eon Timer, which I'm going to pull up here. This thing is also lovely, great Pokemon tool. So the pre-timer just is how many milliseconds you want for it to count you down, and then your target frame is right here, which I have the 238. Let me get that number correct. 2387. This is the frame we want to hit, and I have it on Gen 3. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my game ready to soft reset. So preemptively hold Start, Select, and B. So all I need to do is hit A to soft reset, and I'm going to hit Start on this timer. And you see it's going to beep, and it beeped a couple times, and then it started counting down from 38 or whatever it is. So I'm going to press A to do the soft reset on that final beep. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, bip, and I hit A right when the timer went off. And at this point, you just mash A. Just get through all the menus, resume the game, start talking to the daycare guy, just spam through everything. A. He's going to ask if you want the egg. You're going to say yes until it gets to the line where he says, take good care of it. At that point, do not hit A. You're instead going to wait. And you see this timer ticking down. Right when this hits 0, we're going to hit A, and it's going to exit out of the take good care of it, and that's when we obtain the egg. So just thinking about, I'm hovering my hand over the A button. Here comes the timer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blip. And that's when we hit the A button. So if we timed it perfectly successfully, we will have definitely hit our target frame, and we will have an HP of 31 be randomly generated, attack of 4 will be randomly generated, defense of 31 will be randomly generated, and then these stats will be 31 passed from the parents, and we will get that Blissey we want. So we're going to run around, hatch it, go check with the guy. If he says all of our IVs, except for attack, are perfect, we're good to go. You have to ask him many, many times because, again, he will just randomly tell you stats, and he might just keep telling you defense over and over and over again, even though 5 out of the 6 IVs are perfect. So you do have to ask him many times to determine whether or not you hit the correct frame or not. If you did not hit the correct frame, you got to restart and go again. So you'll see if I change my starting frame here, we'll say 2380 generate, and we will remove all of these other qualifications for our guy. Generate 2387. So this is the one we want to hit, and you could hit something before 2380, but I didn't really feel like that was too relevant. So you'll always hit a frame. So you can go in and check, okay, which one did I hit? And again, no reason to save. Do not save, because then we got to go get a new egg that has the correct PID. But we're just going to go ahead. We can keep feeding this Chansey that we get rare candy and checking against our IV calculators to see what the actual IVs are. So if you know the parent IVs, this also makes it helpful because these slots that are B and A are not just mysteries, right? Like, I didn't necessarily know what my parent's attack stat was in the B slot, so that wasn't really helpful. But you can calculate based on the rest of them. So if I'm going through and I calculate and I determine that my Chansey has an HP of around 16, 28 attack, I know it has a perfect defense, and, maybe I don't. So this is an example, actually, where the only one IV was passed. It's kind of funny. But I'm pretty certain that it's this Chansey that I hit. So this is only 4 frames off our target. Frankly, I can kind of chalk that up to human error and go again with the exact same timing. But if you want, which is what I did, is I actually changed this so that the target frame, because I was 4 early, I actually want to add 4 to this number. So in theory, if I had the exact same perfect timing as I did the first time, which I won't because I'm only human, I would hit my target frame. But it may help you get a little closer. I wouldn't move this too much. I think as long as you're within 5 frames, that's just human error. Just keep doing it over and over again, and you will hit the frame. Keep in mind, it takes, 40 seconds to do the reset, plus probably 4 minutes to actually run around and hatch the egg. So it takes a couple minutes for each attempt, but it really does not take very many attempts, and you can get better at this, and then eventually you will hit this spread that will give you the Blissey that you desire. You can go check with the guy. He can tell you, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen since sliced bread. Wow, you are so cool for obtaining this Chansey. And again, it'll be a Chansey then because it will be small. Okay, from there, we still got a little bit of work to do. Our EVs, right? I told you how you can get EVs, and frankly, at this point, you can kind of figure it out yourself. But there are some faster ways to get some EVs. So first of all, have Blissey in your party. Don't use it to battle. Just go out, find a random Pokemon. Have your, level 100 starter that you had. Go knock out a Poochyena. And keep doing this until Blissey eventually gets pokerus. Then you give it the Macho Brace as its item. And then from there, we're going to go out and we're going to find places that have HP EVs and defense EVs. And I think the best way to do this is just go find a location where you will only find Pokemon that give those stats. So I know that in the Magma Hideout, you can run into Torkoal, which is 2 defense EVs, Graveler, which are 2 defense EVs, and Geodude, which are 1 defense EVs. And we have our multipliers, so this is actually going to turn into 4, 8, and 8 EVs. So getting to 252 won't actually be that bad. So we're going to go ahead, go to that location, send Blissey out first. God bless you. I guess it will be a Chansey at that point. And then swap it out for some other Pokemon, defeat whatever it is, and just kind of keep a record so you know how many EVs you have, and keep doing that until you have 252. Then you can go somewhere else to get the other stat. I guess in this case you'd have defense first, so then you got to go find HP, and you can do that. Keep in mind that Ditto will give 1 HP EV unless it transforms. So if it transforms, it will give the EVs of whatever Pokemon it transformed into. So it's actually kind of helpful. If we evolve Chansey into Blissey, Blissey will actually give 3 HP EVs, which we multiply to get 12 for every one that we knock out. That's pretty good. So if we can actually evolve this, we can, well, and we can kind of do that as we're training. We'll build up some friendship. We'll maybe level it up while we're getting some of these other EVs. We can let the Ditto transform into us, and then switch out, knock it out with another Pokemon, or, if it's a Loudred or something else that gives HP EVs, and then we'll gain some of those. And then once you have 252 and 252, you can just go find, like, something that just gives 1 in special defense, like a Tentacool. Again, because your multiplier is times 4, you only need 1 Pokemon that would give you an EV, and it will give you this last one. And then you will max out your EVs. Another way to go about it is before you any EV training, remember that you can also use 10 of one of the vitamins, so maybe the vitamin for defense, and boost this defense stat up to at least 100 before you actually have to start battling anything. The other important thing, don't use rare candies. If you use rare candies, it will erase all of your EVs since the last time you leveled up. So we're going to wait until we're maxed out in EVs. There's a lady in one of the cities you can go talk to, have this Pokemon in the lead, and it will say, oh my goodness, your Pokemon has gone for it stupendously, meaning they have all of their EVs. At that point, level them up one more time through traditional battling, and from there you can just spam rare candies on it until it gets to the level that you want it to be at. If she does not say it goes for it stupendously, you messed up somewhere. There is some EVs that you missed. You can put all of this information into kind of Showdown or any other calculator that I did here, and you can see if I have all of this appropriate. I should have 714 in my HP stat. You may have to also play around with the level that the Pokemon's at, but if I had a level 29 Blissey, I could put 29 into the level, and then I'm expecting that I have a 31 IV and 252 in HP, and so if this number that ends up popping out is not what my Blissey actually has, I may go, oh crap, I actually missed 4 HP EVs, and I need to go knock out some Pokemon to go obtain that. If you really mess it up, like if you go to 254 and you really want that kind of smidge, that last 1 point back, you can use berries that will decrease the EVs in any given stat by 10, and the berry tells you which one it decreases. They're pretty handy. They also increase happiness, which is nice for Blissey. And I think that you can actually just spam them. So if you just have an unlimited amount of them, for any of these stats that you're not going to put EVs into anyway, or before you EV train it, you can just spam a bunch of that berry and get the happiness up so you can get your Blissey faster. So that should be everything, right? The ability is part of the PID, which we will just keep getting eggs until we get the one we want. Same with the nature. The IVs is a blend of making sure we pick the correct parents before we put them into breed, and they're in the correct slot, and we know which frame we're going to try to abuse. The EVs is just something that we can train the Pokemon with once we have obtained it, and the moves are mostly things that we can give once we've obtained it, but also a special egg move, which we had to pick a particular parent who knows this move to pass on. So if you do all that, you should have a perfectly good to go Blissey. This obviously works for any Pokemon you can breed. It's a little bit more difficult with Pokemon that are male only, or Pokemon that need to breed with Ditto, which are the genderless Pokemon, which is, again, why it's helpful to have some Dittos with perfect IVs, but you can kind of rinse, repeat this process for whatever you want and go obtain some perfect Pokemon to use in the Battle Frontier, or maybe you just like to have them, or you're going to maybe trade them up to new games, or your little cousin thinks that he's hot shit and you really need to spank him with your 252 perfect Blissey and teach him the true meaning of pain. So hopefully you learned something here. If you didn't, that's okay. I'll try to pump out some more guides like this because I learned all this when I was a young lad, and it seems complicated, but it's actually not, and it's kind of fun to abuse this system, and I like sharing that knowledge with people. So keep an eye out for more of those in the future. Until then, Go get some big, thicky blissy.